Tales of the Appalachian Mountains. It's twilight in the Appalachians, that ancient spine of America that folds and falls from Georgia up to Maine. The pines lean close, and the hollers, those narrow, bowl-like valleys, hold sound like it's a thing borrowed and not to be spoken of. The road you followed in daylight seems like it belongs to someone else now. The trees have thicker voices. The air tastes of moss and rain and something older, like a memory you once had and forgot. People who live in these hills don't just pass through the land, they listen to it. The Cherokee, the settlers, the moonshiners, and coal miners, each of them caught rumors and left them like breadcrumbs. Some of those breadcrumbs turned into stories, some of those stories became warnings, and some of those warnings crawled out of the dark and still walk. Tonight we walk a single path through 9 of those warnings. We'll meet creatures that hide from the sun, witches that steal breath, lights that quilt the ridges, and giants who could be as old as the trees. I'll tell what the elders said, what the settlers wrote in shaky ink, and what modern folks filmed on shaky phones. You can call it folklore or call it a legend, or call it proof that the mountains are not empty. Whatever you call it, keep your lantern close and your hands free. Let's start where the earth meets the dark. The moon-eyed people. Eyes in the dark. Before the first plow cracked the ridgeline, before iron roads folded in and the county lines were sung into maps, the Cherokee walked these mountains. They had names for the hollows, the stones, the springs. They had stories that stacked like river stones. One of the oldest is about folk who feared the sun. They called them the moon-eyed people. Short, pale, with eyes like polished moonstones, wide and round and unblinking. They moved at night. They built in caverns and behind ledges, carving low walls and cryptic stonework that sometimes still puzzle those who take a hammer and a guess. In the stories, daylight stung them like grease on fire. The sun was an enemy. Moonlight was their language. Elders tell the story differently in every hollow. In one telling, the moon-eyed lived beside the Cherokee until they grew jealous and secretive, stealing bits of food and knowledge. In another, they came across the water, lost mariners from a far shore, pale from long, sunless voyages. There's even a version that hums like a warning. They weren't born of the earth's light. They were visitors and they watched. The stone wall on Fort Mountain, some people point and say it proves the tale. Others call it a curiosity. The truth is, the wall sits like a question. Who built that slow mile of rock? The mountain keeps the answer. A warrior's tale follows. He's not named in the old ledger, only in mouth memory. Tsani, who walked the ridges near Chota. One moon-high night he heard a scratching in a cleft of rock, soft like a fingernail on slate. He peered in and met 100 pale faces. They whispered in a language that cooled his bones. They moved like smoke and Tsani ran. The Cherokee drove them daylight first, arrows at noon, traps at dawn. Because the pale folk could not bear the high sun, they sealed caves with stone and prayer. But before the rocks fell, one of the moon-eyed peered at the world and spat a curse in a tongue the leaves remember. We see in dark what you fear in light. It hasn't been all myth. Even modern hikers talk about impossibilities. A spelunker in the southern ridges once reported small webbed prints, too narrow for a man, too shaped for a known beast, leading to a collapsed tunnel. A hiker near Nantahala swore he saw white shapes melt between the trunks at dusk, like sheets thrown by an unseen hand. You'll find those accounts in online forums and the low bright lights of late-night message boards. Photographs, blurry and more suggestive than proof, and eyewitnesses whose voices go thin when they stand in daylight again. What do the moon-eyed mean to the people of these hills? They are a caution. Not everything that watches from the dark is human. Not everything that claims the night has the same hunger as you. The stories teach respect for places where light does not reach, mountain mouths where the earth drinks sound, and they warn that some watchers keep their memories longer than we keep our names. So when the moon pools in a hollow and you see eyes like lanterns reflecting so far off you can't tell if they're real, don't search for reason. Don't run closer. The moon-eyed don't simply vanish. They learn and they remember. But nights with pale faces are not the only nights that chill a spine. Some evils like to travel on feathers. Keep your ears open because sometimes a bird is not a bird. The raven mocker. There is a kind of fear that settles thicker than mist, the fear of dying alone or being robbed of the dying. In Cherokee warnings, there is a being who takes advantage of that thin line between breath and the next. They call it the raven mocker. The name carries its own small terror. a stitch of raven cry and mockery. In the old tales, these are witches who learned to wear the skins of raven and hawk, who shortened their tongues by stealing the last beats of other people's hearts to stretch their own years. Not everyone thought they wore feathers at all. Sometimes they were old women who aged backwards when they fed, or neighborhood gossips who found power in taking time. The traditional story is stark and clinical. An elder lies on a mat. Family gathers and murmurs the last songs. Suddenly the hearth goes cold. A shadow hangs over the chest, a pressure, and the old man stops breathing, only to gasp back an hour later. Decades of life siphoned into an unseen vessel. The community turns the healer's eyes outward. They guard the dying with rituals. Blue holly at the window, sharp chants, sage in the blaze, to ward the raven from sitting on the body. There are the healer stories, ones the grandparents told and the grandchildren repeat like scripture around a fire. One winter in the Smokies, a medicine man arrives, his pouches rattling with bones and whispers. A mother slips away from a fevered cough. He lays holly at the sill and mutters a naming charm. At midnight, something beats the air like wings in a long, dry room. The healer calls a chant and the sound scrabbles away. The woman breathes. In the telling, the song was old as hills and the holly sharp as iron. Modern ears might smile at charms, but people who have worked the night shift in small-town hospitals say strange things happen, with a regularity that sticks in their ribs. Nurses trade tales in staff rooms about patients who crash only between midnight and 2, only to return with glassy eyes that tell of a bird pressing on them. A few of these stories went viral once, filmed in dim rooms, short clips of shadows moving across walls, captions predicting a morning death that sometimes, disruptively, did come true. We must be careful here. Hospital monitors fail, people die unexpectedly, and grief needs stories to hold. But folklore exists because something needed naming. For the Cherokee, a raven mocker is not a metaphor. It's a way of explaining why in certain houses the old drop like fruit, and in others they cling to a few stolen seasons because someone kept the vigil. That is the real lesson carved beneath all the feathers. Vigil matters. Community matters. A warding charm is less about magic than about being present. When you have someone awake in the night with you, there is less space for devouring things to slip in. If you're told a home care nurse in a mountain town told you her patient said, "A bird pressed on me," don't take it as proof the raven mocker sits at the window. Take it as evidence of what these stories do. They give shape to the peculiar cruelty of dying alone. They explain the small injustices, the way one family's luck changes in the dark while another's does not. The raven mocker teaches the same as any good story. The old must be watched over, for some things love cannot protect. And when the feathers are gone, sometimes the fear that created them walks on 4 feet. Keep your shoulders turned, the hills have cat eyes too. The Wampus Cat. Curiosity in the wrong place is a dangerous hunger. That's the moral that undergirds the Wampus Cat story. The woman who wanted knowledge forbidden to her, who paid in flesh. Different tribes and settlements told versions of it. A common thread: a woman disguised in a mountain lion's pelt spies on a sacred council. Her intent might be simple prying or something darker: vengeance, jealousy, secret love. She is caught. The punishment is transformation: a woman fused with cougar, a body that hunts across ridges, a scream that will never again be only human. That scream becomes crucial. It's described as 2 things at once: sorrow and malice. It can bring a grown man to his knees because it is both the sound of loss and hunger. Older versions say she became guardian of the forest's rights, a punishment turned into penitence. Newer ones say she hunts moonshiners and linen-white trespassers who steal from sacred ground. Stories pile up like leaves. In the Prohibition years, a moonshiner in Cock County tells of a night when fog sat low and something circled his still. He says he heard a woman's sob that twisted into a growl, a sound too long for a throat and too low for a feline. He watched a figure with 2 long limbs and a face that was wrong from some angles glide away into the wood. His still was untouched, but he sold it soon after, left town with shaking hands and a pocket full of coins. Trail cameras have given modern storytellers new toys. In recent years, a sequence of grainy frames in the Smokies showed a shape moving upright but with a feline glide. Too tall, too narrow for a known animal. Hunters debate whether the grain is a trick of light. Locals say there are better things to fear in the deep nights than technical explanations. Symbolically, the Wampus is layered. To Cherokee storytellers, It was a warning about breaking sacred trust, transgressing communal law. To frontier settlers, it was an image of the thin line between human and animal life when the wilderness pressed in. To contemporary narrators, she's a reminder that guilt and curiosity can turn you feral. There's religious fury in the earliest tellings and a feminist undertone in others. The woman punished for taking knowledge she was denied. So when a hunter in a hollow tells you his dog won't go beyond the creek at night, when you hear an unplaceable cry in the 1 a.m. hush, know there are old stories beneath the sound. Know some of them are still true because the people keep telling them. From prowling cats, we slide into things that don't prowl at all but dance. Lights that move like memories and refuse to die. The brown mountain lights. If the Wampus is a scream, the brown mountain lights are a question. For centuries, though, the name changes with each settler and each wind. A particular ridge in North Carolina has been known for its small, moving lights that come out at night and refuse easy explanation. The Cherokee saw them as searching women, widows combing the ridges for lost husbands after a battle. Settlers called them witch lanterns and grave spirits. Counties kept journals of sightings going back to the 1700s, men in buckskins noting a glow in the distance like a cooking pot left on coals, but no one recorded a clear cause. The lights are strange because of their behavior. They don't follow wind or tree line neatly. They will dart under an overhang as if avoiding a low branch, then leap out and climb as if following a ladder. Witnesses speak in the language of wonder and danger. It watched me, it hovered like it had a mind. Campers have claimed the orbs will play, following a flashlight then slipping away. Others insist they circle with intent, as if marking the spots of old graves. Skeptics point to swamp gas and reflections of distant headlights over the layers of valley air. Scientists will sometimes write a paper about thermal illusions. But these explanations fade when older accounts are read side by side with modern ones. There are diaries from long before cars, testimonials from miners and mountain women who say the lights moved with purpose in a ridge with no traffic. In one famous telling, a hunter raised his gun at a blue glow and watched as it popped like a soap bubble into a cascade of sparks and vanished. He never hunted that ridge again. Videos from modern campers have made the lights a tourist draw. Grainy footage circulates, two orbs bobbing over a tree line, shifting speed in ways that suggest not wind but some deliberate agency. People speak of a chill that settles over you when the lights are near, and of the way the hush thickens like damp wool. On a symbolic note, these lights fit into a widespread human pattern. We will not abandon the dead. The lights can be mournful, they can be mischievous. They point to human longing. If a light follows you on the trail, the old whispers say that the spirit has chosen, and sometimes chosen spirits are hard to dissuade. So when fog drifts across Brown Mountain and a blue point wavers where no lantern should burn, don't call it only science. Call it a continuity. The hill remembers those who loved and lost on its slopes. And some memories are restless. When lights dance, people notice. When the ground itself refuses to host life, people get hungrier to know why. The Devil's Tramping Ground. A circle without roots. There is a place in central North Carolina, a perfect circle where nothing grows. You can spread seed, drop a stone, plant a sapling, and by morning the soil refuses your gift. People call it the Devil's Tramping Ground. The story says that's where he paces in the night, thinking calumny. The rhythm of his pace scorched the soul of the soil. Stories cluster like storm clouds. Teenagers dare each other to camp inside the circle and return with clothes torn and an unplaceable heaviness behind their eyes. Farmers will not let their plow cross the rim. Dogs snarl and will not step into it. Old men tell of leaving a horseshoe in the center and finding it laid neatly on the circle's outside edge by morning. Investigations came and went. Some scientists ran tests and found nothing tangible. No toxin, no mineral imbalance that would prevent growth. That only thickened rumors. If the ground is normal and still refuses to let life take, then something else is responsible. Something that folklore can name, and science can't. The 1700s origin tale uses moral allegory. A stranger, maybe the devil himself, took a liking to the patch of land and declared it his stage. Since then, he paces in the night and the ground keeps his steps. The important human detail here is humility. There are parts of the earth that will not be made to fit our schedules. The circle is a taboo wrapped in superstition. Taboo matters because it contains community memory. Places you do not mess with. If a place resists, your first reaction should be respect. If you feel brave, test the circle for yourself. But if you do, do it with reverence and with witnesses. Don't go alone. And if you do and wake to find the tent shredded and your pack missing, do not treat it only as a prank. In the mountains, some stakes hold. From the soil we climb into something older and louder, an evil that wears people's names and tastes like gossip. The Bell Witch. If you asked 100 people in the southern hills what the single scariest haunting ever told in these parts was, many would name the Bell Witch. The story is so dense with detail, so full of written testimony, so modern in its feel, that it passed from pine-blanketed rumor into American legend. We go back to the early 1800s. The Bell family lived near Adams, Tennessee. It started small, knocks in the wall, a swiftness of shadow. Then the knocking became insulting. The voice that spoke called itself Kate, and seemed to take the particular joy of maligning John Bell. She stole food, pulled covers off beds, and sometimes, it was said, slapped people until marks rose. Neighbors came and heard the voice. It mimicked them. It named things it shouldn't have known. The story tells of a great many witnesses, soldiers, ministers, even politicians who visited and left convinced. There's a recorded chronology of events in letters and pamphlets from that century that people still read aloud at haunted house nights. John fell ill, and some said he was poisoned. Other accounts said his disease had a sudden witchish swell. Kate gloated openly that she had shortened his life. She named future events, quoted scripture backwards, and declared a horrible knowledge of the Bell family's private fails. Betsy Bell, one of his daughters, claimed to be slapped and scratched. Sometimes she woke with marks. The atmosphere of terror became a small community's main news. Modern retellings added spice. Andrew Jackson, the future president, came to stay a night and fled with his teeth chattering. That may be embellishment, but it speaks to how the story grew into a regional obsession. The Witch's Cave. There is a place now where tourists come and try to spend an hour, and sometimes visitors report a pinching sensation or unexplained thumps. This haunting sticks because it's intimate. It's not a distant light or a rustle on a ridge. It's a witch in the kitchen mocking you as you stir the pot. It edges into everything familiar and makes it untrue. There are deeper readings too. In a time of community fracturing, the Bell Witch legend provided a theater for local anxieties. Was the witch an external demon? Or a projection of grudges and property conflicts and the uglier politics of a small town? The tale is useful because it can be both real and symbolic. It's a social wound wrapped in a ghost story. If you ever find yourself near the old farm and laugh at those who swear they felt a slap, remember the witch loves an audience. She grows with each telling, and if you speak her name too often in the dark, the old people say you give her more rope. When voices taunt, sometimes another kind of voice, one with wings, arrives to be taken more seriously. The Mothman. Wings at the river. The Mothman is a different kind of Appalachian legend, born in the mid-20th century, but quickly mythologized. It is the kind of modern beast that spreads by newspaper and testimony, then takes on ritual, festivals, books, a permanent space in the cultural imagination. Point Pleasant, West Virginia in the 1960s was our stage. Wartime bunkers and an aging TNT plant created shadows, and the Ohio River bent like a dark throat. The first reports were ephemeral. People described a large creature, tall as a man but with wings whose eyes glowed red like stove coals. The encounters clustered. Couples, police officers, gravediggers, people who ought to be taken seriously, described a hulking shape that watched them and sometimes followed them by road. The panic grew as sightings stacked. Then disaster came. The Silver Bridge, laden with winter traffic, collapsed. 46 people died. The timing cemented the Mothman in myth. Many who saw the creature interpreted it as an omen, a harbinger of the impending collapse. Others insisted the Mothman was responsible somehow. The line between warning and catalyst blurred. There are drone footage debates. There are festival weekends with people in winged masks selling t-shirts. There are still people who claim to see red eyes where no eyes should be. Either way, there is a cultural lesson. Collective dread needs a face. The Mothman was the face Appalachia wore for a time. The symbolism is wide. A being that both watches and cannot be understood. A conscience in wings. A mechanism for communal guilt about infrastructure, industry, the ways modernity cracks bridges and kills people. The Mothman reminds us that big events do not happen in isolation. They are often signaled by smaller phrase we refuse to stitch. If you walk along a roadside near an abandoned industrial site and see a silhouette too human to be a bird, feel your heart skip and listen. The mountains have ways of warning. Whether those warnings are literal or metaphorical, they worked once. That is enough for the story to keep living. The Flatwoods Monster. Some nights, the sky brings an animal the hills never knew. In 1952, a small town in Braxton County told of a fireball flashing across the heavens and landing somewhere on a ridge. Kids ran to investigate, and what they found was not a meteor so much as a creature. A tall form, armored in metal, with a glowing face and a shrieking hiss. The smell described afterwards was sulfur and burning metal, and people suffered headaches and nausea for days. This is the Flatwoods Monster encounter. It reads like a 20th century panic, equal parts UFO report and old-school monster tale. The witnesses were children and grown men who never forgot the hiss and the smell. Police went up the hill and found scorched earth. The official explanation softened into an owl in a bad light, an explanation that made sense if you ignored the smell and the sustained symptoms. What interests the storyteller is not only the oddity of the account, but what it represents about the mid-century mind. People were watching the sky with new eyes. Rockets, thermonuclear tests, and the dawn of space created an atmosphere where landing lights and metallic bodies could be imagined in real, terrible terms. The Flatwoods Monster is a child of that age, a myth cast in steel and panic. Yet these metal monsters are not just science fiction. Across Appalachia, people report humming lights, metallic smells, and places where the air tastes wrong for nights after some event. In those spots, people who were there remember nausea and burning at the back of the throat. Images burned like press plates into their memory. The modern retellings sometimes add drones and infrared cameras, but even without those, the original witnesses held to their story until they died. If tonight you see a light that smells of iron and makes your throat sting, don't go up the hill with a flashlight and a grin. Some things fall from the sky and leave behind more than scorch marks. From the sky, we turn back to the forest because the oldest things rarely left. Giants who walk in the trees and knock at midnight. Bigfoot in the Appalachians is not a single story with an origin. It is an accumulation of reports, pre-colonial references to wild men, and post-industrial encounters. The Cherokee had their wild man, and settlers later found their own versions. Later guys called him Sasquatch or Bigfoot. Here he's the hairy man of the mountains. Descriptions converge. Towering hair-clad, the odor of wet earth and musk, a bipedal gait that leaves massive prints. Encounters vary, some friendly, others ominous. There are tales of eyes seen in lantern light, of wood knocks in the dark, of strange deliberate arrangements of stones and sapling tiers as if someone marked territory. In the 1940s and 50s, logging and roads pushed deeper into the woods, and people reported curious things near camps. Circular depressions that seemed intentionally placed, trees bent at shoulder height, and the familiar thunder of steps at night. Camera traps have produced frames of blurred, upright shapes at a distance. Skeptics scoff and point to bears, bad lighting, or hoaxes. Believers point to the continuity of sightings for decades and the sheer amount of untamed ground here. The symbolic pull of Bigfoot is strong. He is the forest's otherness, a physical attestation that humans are not the only intelligent concern in the woods. Where industry moved in and the forest pushed back, Bigfoot functions as a mythic guardian. He is sometimes framed as retribution, a wild conscience that watches men who take too much. Other times he is simply there, inscrutable, interested in our lights and our noise. A park ranger might tell you a story in hushed terms. A hiker called in a trembling voice about a pair of glowing eyes and a heavy silhouette on a ridge. By dawn, there were huge prints in the wet soil, shaped like a shoe but wrong. The ranger chalked it up to stress and weather, but the hiker packed up and left town with a feverish look he never quite lost. If you walk a long, lonely trail and feel your skin crawl like rain, know the mountain remembers feet older than yours, and sometimes it places them close to ours. It started with night and ended with dawn. That's the simplest way to say what these stories do. They make the long, dark smaller by filling it with shape. They give meaning to noises and protect us by teaching fear, from cave folk who prefer moonlight, to witches who steal breath, to cats that were once women, to lights and barren circles, to a witch that mocked a family and monsters that warned and fell from the sky. These stories thread together. They are warnings and memory, Social lesson and entertainment, theology and terror. They are the community's way of naming what it cannot control. Folklore is not a lack of knowledge. It is another form of it. When the Cherokee told of Tsul Kalu or moon-eyed folk, when settlers scribbled of witches and lights, they were recording a million small human truths. That the wild is not ours to own, that dying alone is intolerable, that the land keeps a long ledger. Stories create obligations. Keep the vigil, leave certain circles alone, never spy on councils. They are legalisms written in fear. So the next time you find yourself on a ridge as the fog grows teeth and the stars are brittle as glass, listen. The leaves will speak in voice not entirely human. The rustle in the rhododendron might be a moon-eyed slipping between roots. The wind could be a raven mocker counting breaths. A glow on the far slope might be a woman looking for someone she lost. A hollow circle could be a footprint the devil left in dirt. Or it might be nothing. But nothing in these mountains is a strange thing to trust. Thank you for walking these ridges with me tonight. If you've got a story, something you heard from an old porch, some footage on a dusty phone, a knock at 2 a.m., leave it below. These mountains are full of listeners. Tell yours, and maybe when the next soul walks a trail and hears a strange sound, they'll think of you and know they are not the first.